Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, Sikhs descend today on the White House to get their voices heard as President Trump hosts a visiting Narendra Modi. Meanwhile, back in Punjab, the slow pace of Indian justice finally moves in favour of the Sikh community, as a former Congress MP is sentenced for his part in the 1984 genocide, only 40 years late. And in another case, only 8 years late this time, 2 Sikhs are actually cleared of putting up khalistan referendum posters. Not just deliberately delayed justice, but raising the whole question of the failing democratic foundations of India. And we have our final update on the Invictus Games in Canada. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers out there. I noticed that the comments were a little short this week, or at least in the last show, so let's hope that you pick that up and share some comments with us, because we loved reading them, and it was short reading on the last show. So again, share your comments, but don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the channel, and invite all your friends. We want more people, because the more the merrier, folks.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And yes, we will indeed, as usual, take a look at loads of your great comments, which have been filling up below at least some of our earlier videos. So thank you as always for those. Right, James, let's get the show on the road. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
SIGN Kumar guilty once again. Now, we know that he's already serving time in prison for the previous deaths and other events of the genocide in 1984. But now, in this latest case, he has been found guilty once again. He will be sentenced later this month, and that I'm expecting will be followed very closely by the international media, as the justice system has moved slow and very sparingly in holding people accountable for the deaths of Sikhs in the 1984 genocide that followed up the death of course, that was the Prime Minister at the time. With that happening, the battles and the riots, as they are so called, but we face the truth and call it a genocide, which broke out following Indira Gandhi's death. Now, of course, we know that this trial has been going on for a bit, but this specific one was in relation to the death of Jaswant Singh and his son, Tarandeep Singh. Now, they were just hunted down and just viciously attacked and killed by an angry mob that was led by SIGN Kumar. And this has been something that he has been recognized previously in the life sentences that he's been handed down for other mobs and other acts of violence that took place throughout 1984. Now, this is really important in the fact that he was actually a politician. He was a Congress MP, and he led the government, and the representation of the government was attacking Sikhs and acting out in what we describe as the genocide. And it was not acceptable that not only did that happen, but that it has seen just decades before any wheels of justice started to turn at all. There have been very few people who have been held accountable by the courts, by the criminal justice system, and by the political parties, whether it's the BJP or anybody else, to hold them account and say, listen, what you did was murder. It was wrong, and you are going to pay for it. And that just hasn't happened yet. This is a very, very small step, and we hope that it is a step in the right direction moving forward, that more people see the power of the legal system. But we're not going to hold our breath waiting on that, because we know how it works in India. Now, to look at this a bit further in terms of his history of SIGN Kumar, and that took place, as I said, he had a political career in which he was elected to the Lok Sabha in the lower house of India's parliament from the Outer Delhi constituency in 1984. He was elected several times, so he won re-election and continued even after people were aware of his involvement in the anti-Sikh genocides of 1984. Now, he was incited of leading the mobs and targeting the Sikhs, which we've already talked about, and the riots that resulted in the deaths of thousands of Sikhs across India, and possibly tens of thousands, as we know that the numbers have been underreported by the India government and the judicial system and law enforcement. Now, in 2018, Delhi court sentenced him to life in prison for his role in the death of 5 Sikhs which were murdered in the Rajnagar area during that genocide. In another case in February 2025, which is the one that we are referring to now, he has been found guilty of that murder of a father and son during the same period, with sentencing arguments, again, as I said, coming up February the 18th. And we will definitely keep an eye on that and keep our viewers informed of the revelations and the process there. Whether or not it'll take place or it'll be delayed, we'll have to wait and see. But he has seen many other cases against him. He has seen other acts in the courts where he has tried to appeal sentences. And although he has had some success in a minor end, when you look at the big picture, he is being held to account and going to be probably in jail until he dies. And hopefully that's the case because of the fact of what he did, that not only was a crime against the Sikhs, but a crime against people of India and of the world. And this is something that we continue to bring and shine light on, not just the Sikh genocides, but the ongoing mistreatment of Sikhs, of Muslims, of Christians, and all other minorities within the boundaries of India. And it has to stop. There has to be an outcrying from the world to put pressure on Narendra Modi and say enough is enough. They need to be following the UN mandate on human rights, and it just is something that needs to happen, and we encourage all of our viewers to spread that word and make sure that if you have the opportunity, send your MP, your MLA, your congressman, no matter where you are in the world, you can send a message to your leaders via email or other means and let them know that, hey, you need to put pressure on India as they want to expand their trade missions around the world, and use that as a bargaining chip for them to start honoring human rights of all people, of everybody within their boundaries, and also of foreigners, and to stop the transnational repression that they have been part of for the last, decades on decades.
Yeah, James, this is, 40 years too late, really. And I mean, it's great. It is fantastic that finally people like this are being held to account in the public eye for the dreadful crimes that they committed 40 years ago. But it was 40 years ago. And as we've often reported, many of the guilty have since died. They lived free lives. They perpetrated some of the most dreadful crimes against humanity during that time in autumn of 1984, during the Sikh Genocide. And they spent their lives free, and then they've finally passed away, evading justice their entire lives. Fortunately, this gentleman has finally faced the stern rule of law. But again, it's a drop in the ocean, really. It's symbolic to some degree, but it is a drop in the ocean. And when we talk about the scale of the killings, the murders, the tortures, the dreadful acts of violence that occurred during those few days in 1984, it's a drop in the ocean about the enormous tsunami of justice that is still owed against so many people who perpetrated this. And let's remind ourselves, this guy is a former Congress MP. He's a former elected member of the Indian Parliament, the lower house. And he was guilty of one of the most heinous crimes that India has witnessed in modern times. And this actually does, and I do refer our audience back to, I did a series of 4 programs, 4 feature-length programs, where we looked at the events of 1984, the events leading up to the attack on the Harmandir Sahib, the events post that, the killing, the heroic death of Bhindranwale during that action in June. Then, of course, the assassination of Indira Gandhi, which then led on to the genocide that followed in the few days after. And I do set out in I would say, excruciatingly painful detail some of the acts that occurred, just to remind people of how horrific these acts were. And they included the mass gang rapes of many of the women. Young women were literally dragged, Sikh women were dragged out of their homes and gang raped by violent mobs. Children were literally murdered in front of their families. Men were dragged out of their houses in front of their wives and children. Tyres were put around them and they were set alight and beaten by iron rods. I mean, that is just a small part of the atrocities that happened during that time. But of course, what led to this is it was a mad, angry mob. It was mob violence. But mobs don't just form accidentally. They form out of a reason. The reason was for people like this former Congress MP. They were actually incited into this violence. There were people on the radio imploring Hindus to get out on the streets and kill Sikhs. I forget the actual Hindi words they used, but it was quite well known at the time. It was a war cry, effectively, encouraging people to take to the streets and literally kill Sikhs, to take vengeance for Indira Gandhi. And that was one thing. So the motivation was provided across the public service, across the public radio. Another thing that a mob needs to go out there and kill people is it needs direction. A mob just doesn't accidentally sort of form and then just go off and kill people. It needs some form of direction. This direction was provided by a small number of very high-ranking people in the Indian government, one of which was this gentleman. Actual members of the Congress Party, actual politicians were behind. They were seen driving around Delhi and other parts, particularly in the Punjab, driving around these areas, handing out a dress list of Sikh families. So in other words, the mobs were actually handed out targets, lists of targets. Go out, here's the people you need to kill. That's how they knew where these people lived. They were also provided with transport. Buses were laid on to bus mobs to areas of large Sikh populations in the towns and the cities. So these people were actually provided with a motive, they were provided with addresses, they were provided with transport, they were also provided with weaponry. They were given iron rods and other things, and in some cases Molotov cocktails. They were provided with these weapons to then go attack these innocent Sikh families. Don't forget, these are women and children that were murdered and tortured in the streets. Again, it is absolutely horrific what went on. And this is justice 40 years later. The events of 1984 will forever be a disgusting stain on India's history, primarily because it wasn't just the mobs that were involved in this. It went all the way up to the government, up to Indira Gandhi's government. That is why she was targeted for her past acts, and that is why Congress has since been targeted, and why Rahul Gandhi, frankly, needs to apologise on behalf of his family and on behalf of the Congress Party, and indeed on behalf of India itself. And again, apologies have always been very, very few and far between. Accountability has almost been absent on behalf of India for the events of 1984, all the events of 1984, but particularly for the genocide, even though the fact that the term genocide has actually, in fact, been recognised legally by the Indian government. But apologies have been few and far between. The justice has been desperately absent. This, as I said, is an absolute drop in the ocean for the guilty who perpetrated those dreadful acts. India has an awful lot to atone for itself for this. But the other disgusting stain on India wasn't just from 1984. It is now in 2025, when the slow wheels of justice have still not delivered enough justice for those events of 1984. This, as I said, is a drop in the ocean. There are still plenty of other guilty for not just the events of 1984, but the events that followed that throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, the extrajudicial killings where a whole generation of young Sikhs were murdered in cold blood by the Indian state. Nobody else but the Indian state. They were guilty of that. They remain guilty. The current government remains complicit in that because they are not holding the guilty to account. They are not bringing those who perpetrated these acts of violence against innocent people to justice these days, James. It remains forevermore a stain on modern India.
It certainly does, Angus. And it's just, as I said, it's sad that it's taken so long, and yet there's been so little in terms of the volume of criminal actions and charges that should be or should have been brought up through the judicial system for decades now. And we're hearing one here, one there, but there are thousands and thousands of people that should have been facing charges, and it's just sad they haven't. But with that said, Angus, let's move on to something a bit more cheerful to round up the week of coverage with the Invictus Games here in Vancouver and in Whistler. Now, the Invictus Games got their name from a poem, and I thought that it was really one that resonates or could resonate with the Sikh community if they knew the poem behind the name. So let's take a look at some of the fans, the volunteers, and of course the poem that's behind the name and where the tagline "I am" comes from, Angus. We'll enjoy that, and then we'll also take a look at the medal counts, because what are the games without knowing who's cleaning up at the medal podiums?
Doing what we can to support veterans. I'm a Marine Corps veteran myself, and most of my friends are service-connected disabled. I work with a lot of people in the North Texas veterans healthcare system, and a lot of my friends have service-connected disabilities just like I do that are sometimes not so visible wounds of war. Some of my friends that are combat veterans that have seen some hard times and seen some things that aren't necessarily how you were kind of raised to deal with. It makes it tough. And when you can sit and talk to somebody about that, you can share, and there's an understanding, there's a level of understanding where people can help each other and be there for one another. That's what it's all about. The sports, again, it's another venue, another way to be able to share and release some of that pent-up energy and have some fun and be competitive. Can't beat it. It's the Invictus Games is priceless. Prince Harry did one of the greatest things, put this thing together. It was awesome.
I'm working with Whistler Adaptive Sports, and I am the Nordic and Biathlon coordinator for the coaches and also the adaptive equipment. To see a bunch of names on paper and very minimal details on their background, to then meet those people at the fitting days in Vancouver, understand them, understand their story, give them this piece of equipment that means they can get out on snow, race, compete, and then seeing them at the finish line, seeing them on the podium, it's, wow.
Come on, guys, up! You got it! Woo!
So, for example, Team Columbia have never seen snow before, but we got them into the equipment they needed. They all finished the course. That, for me, for a story, is just incredible. And then they're going to go home and look back at all these insane photos from today, and it's the legacy, I guess, that comes with it. It's pretty cool.
Thank you for joining us once again for an update on the Invictus Games in Vancouver and Whistler, British Columbia, here on Perspectives. Of course, you're joining us on the Savage Network, and we are excited to bring you some updates. We thought tonight we would start, though, by giving a bit of the background of the name Invictus and where it comes from. And essentially, the Invictus Games get their name from William Ernest Henley's poem Invictus, which means unconquered in Latin. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, chose the name after brainstorming with his team. The Invictus Games are an international sporting competition for injured, sick, and wounded veterans and service personnel. The first games were held in London in 2014, and the games are held every 2 years. The name Invictus represents the fighting spirit of the competitors and what they can achieve after injury. The game's values include inspiring international communities, encouraging a greater international understanding and respect for those who serve their country, inspiring recovery and supporting the rehabilitation of wounded, injured, and sick personnel and veterans. Prince Harry was inspired to create the games after visiting the Warrior Games in the United States in 2013. Now, I thought that I would actually read out the poem that the name comes from. And again, it is called Invictus, and it goes like this. Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloodied, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Once again, that was from William Ernest Henley. And of course, the slogan, I am, that encapsulates the games wherever they go, encourages people to use the hashtag I am and then add their own descriptive after that. I personally have been using I am inspired due to the fact that I am greatly inspired by the incredible strength and perseverance of all of those participants, and also the leadership of the Invictus Games staff and the countless volunteers that make the games happen year after year. Now let's take a look at this year's medal count as of February the 12th, 2025. And given the number of medals so far, I'm not going to name each individual or sport, but I'll give a summary of each country's wins. Australia has 3 golds, 2 silver, and 2 bronze. Belarus has 2 silvers. Canada has 3 gold, 5 silver, and 0 bronze. Colombia has 1 gold and 1 silver. Denmark has 1 silver and 1 bronze. Estonia has made away with 1 gold so far. France has 1 gold, 2 silver, and 4 bronze. Georgia has gotten themselves a gold. No silver and no bronze yet, but we'll keep watching that team. Germany has 1 gold and 1 bronze so far. Israel, 1 gold and 2 bronze. Italy at 4 golds. No silver and no bronze. They're going strictly for the gold, apparently. The Republic of Korea has 1 gold, 1 silver, and 1 bronze. Lithuania has walked away so far with 1 silver medal. The Netherlands has 1 silver. New Zealand has walked away with 1 in each category. That's 1 gold, 1 silver, and 1 bronze. Poland is up there with 1 gold, 1 silver, and 2 bronze so far. And the United Kingdom is next. They have 3 gold, 4 silver, and 5 bronze. A great medal count so far for the United Kingdom. Now let's take a look at Ukraine, who seems to be cleaning up very well. The Ukraine teams and individuals have so far 6 gold medals, 5 silver medals, and 5 bronze medals, for a total of 16 medals for Ukraine thus far. Team Unconquered has 1 bronze, and we'll keep an eye on them to see how they produce in the next series throughout the coming days. The United States of America leading the pack at 9 gold, 10 silver, and 4 bronze. Congratulations to all of the athletes, all of the teams who have been pouring their heart and soul into the games, and again, also to all of the volunteers who are coming together to make it happen. Now, we know that historically the games have taken place. They started with the inaugural games in London, and then in no particular order, they've also been to Sydney, to The Hague, to Toronto, Orlando, and of course this year in Vancouver and Whistler, British Columbia. The next games will be held in the United Kingdom in 2027. Look how Birmingham, the Invictus Games, are coming your way in 2027. And we know the excitement that it has brought to Vancouver and Whistler, and wish Birmingham all the best in, of course, hosting an amazing games that they have planned. Once again, you've been watching Savage TV. This is James Cousineau and Angus Scott for Perspectives. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and keep up to date on our stories on our show and all the information that matters to you. And that was one of your UK guys doing the push-ups after the big wipeout there, Angus. It was pretty funny to watch. I got a chuckle out of that. And as for the Colombians, I mean, they're there and they've never seen snow before. It reminds me of the Jamaican bobsled team of the Olympics when they were in Calgary, Alberta, Canada years back, and which the movie with John Candy was based on, Cool Running. So that's a lot of fun. But again, there's just so much going on, so much to report on with so little time, Angus.
Indeed. In fact, yes, the Cool Runnings did actually immediately spring to mind when I saw some of that winter sports. But yeah, and I think actually it's quite a valid comparison, because of course Cool Runnings was about the underdogs doing essentially their very best against all the odds. And it didn't matter if they won, the fact that it was all about taking part. And I think that really is the message about the Invictus Games. It does come across a lot through what we see there visually. A lot of this is, yes, of course, technically it's a competition. In reality, it is really about taking part. And you can just sense that camaraderie. And of course, I often compare it to the Olympics. The Olympics is very much, absolutely to its very core, a competition. Every athlete there pretty much is there to win. You know, their whole motivation is that I've got to win. They've trained for a lifetime to win that gold medal. That's what they are there for. But this is different. The Invictus Games is actually just, I'm there because, thank heavens, you know, I've made it there. It's just taking part is the key thing. If they happen to win a medal, then all the better. You know, great. But of course, everybody who's there is or was a service man or woman in whatever armed forces for their nation. So they've already been doing selfless service for their nations. And of course, when you see them all interacting, they're soldiers, or whatever they happen to be, airmen, soldiers, or whatever. But they all have that shared bond. They've all served for their countries. And having served myself here in the UK, I mean, of course, there's always rivalry between yourself and another nation's soldiers whenever you interact with them. But deep down, there is that common bond. You are soldiers. There is always that camaraderie, that bond between you as soldiers. Essentially, you're just doing the same job. You just happen to be carrying different flags. And you sense that a lot at the Invictus Games, which I think is a very important part and a very positive part. What I would say, though, and I refer back to a point I made earlier, is when you went through the medals table, James, it's interesting thinking all those nations that were there, fantastic, and you think again of the Olympics, that almost every nation on earth is represented at the Olympics. But that's one thing. But mustn't forget, every nation that represents the Invictus Games is a nation that must have been at war, whose soldiers have lost their lives, who've been maimed and injured. That is why they are at Invictus Games. So when we go through that medal table, that is a list of countries that are or have been recently at war, that have suffered, that young men and women have suffered death and serious injury. They have been maimed. Families have lost loved ones. That is why each nation that is represented in that medal table are there. We mustn't forget that awful message that, again, this is actually a very sad indictment of humanity of the world. Now, I don't think there's been a period in human history when we haven't had a war somewhere or a battle somewhere on the face of the planet. That unfortunately seems to be the sad inevitability of humanity. We have had a relatively peaceful number of decades since the Second World War, but even during those decades of relative global peace, there still has been war. And again, a sad indictment of humanity that, again, there are so many people at these games and so many countries represented, that does in fact, even in a time, an era of general global peace, we still have wars going on. Of course, Ukraine is an immediate one that springs to mind. But all those nations there with soldiers who've been injured, they represent nations who have experienced war recently. And that, to me, is the sad message I take from this very poignant situation, James. It's, again, wonderful to see all these people doing great things, but ultimately, I think, to me, the message still remains pretty sad underneath.
Definitely does. And, that's just a reminder, too, that some of these individuals, especially Team Ukraine, some of these athletes will actually be returning home to Ukraine and then going back to positions supporting military or on the front lines. So it's not like they are out of the woods with being a part of the games. They go back and they go right back into the trenches, some of them. So it's really important, but it also, I think, really gives that inspiration to others who may be very soon subjected to injuries or, whatever the case may be, that their life is not over. It may take a different direction than what they had envisioned and what they had planned. But the Invictus Games at the end of the day is all about giving that inspiration, allowing them to really understand that they truly are unconquered. They can still move forward and make an impact in this world. And that's what I think everybody needs to know and everybody needs to inspire to. And that is to make a change no matter how small in the world in which you live. Because as we know, you throw a pebble and the ripple effect of the waves just continues on out there, Angus.
Indeed, absolutely. And just to end on a positive note, it was lovely seeing the great snow conditions on a slightly more frivolous note. The snow conditions looking magnificent, I have to say, in Canada there, James.
That they are, Angus. And, for those that are going down the luge runs and the skeleton runs, my hat's off to you, because when I was young and we used to compete, we didn't even wear helmets, so that might explain a lot.
Yes, I think my skiing days were helmetless as well, and I did suffer some fairly major crashes, which might explain an awful lot. Anyway, James, let's move further south now, south of your border into the United States, and of course, as we reported, Narendra Modi is actually in the United States. I believe he actually has landed in the United States for his visit to have his face-to-face with Donald Trump. And of course, this is a very significant meeting, a very interesting meeting. An awful lot of things on the agenda to discuss. Of course, we've talked about the geopolitics, the relationships between India and the United States on regular occasions. There is an awful lot to discuss. Essentially, the overriding message, the overriding goal for certainly the United States is they need India on side because of a growing potential threat from China. Likewise, that the major issue for Narendra Modi is to try and get the United States on side because they see that as a big market for Indian growth and development, economically speaking. So there's an awful lot on the table of the big issues. But of course, one of the issues that certainly plagued his last visit to the United States when he visited Joe Biden was the Sikh community managed to get in there just before his arrival and actually have an audience with the US administration at a very senior level. And it has been known that the Sikh issues were actually discussed by Joe Biden with Narendra Modi at the time. Of course, those issues included transnational oppression and other things. But this time, there are no reports of any prior meetings with the administration between Sikh organisations. If there have been any meetings, they've certainly been kept quiet. I don't think any have taken place. So instead of that, the Sikh community is organising, it is rallying, it is doing what it does best. It is organising a bit of a Sikh get-together. It is rallying the troops into the streets. It is actually now saying that Sikhs from all across North America should now descend upon the White House to make their voices heard. Yes, indeed, to protest against this visit of Indian Prime Minister Modi, who is, of course, accused of heading the violent targeting of American Sikh activists in the US. And there have been various posters posted up across social media. Now, and I'll just highlight a couple of these, which again, just I think summarises the typical activist campaigning from the community, very effective campaigning. The Sikh Coordination Committee, the East Coast and Panthic organisation, their latest one saying there is an anti-Modi rally and they proclaim that Sikhs are not safe. Indeed, they're not, as we often report. And they're saying, please convene outside the White House today. Now, of course, the White House, I'm looking at the clock now, the White House is, it's the early hours, it's the middle of the night. So in about 8 or 9 hours' time, the White House lights will be being turned on for the early morning. So certainly as the US wakes up today, you are invited to attend at 11 a.m. outside on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington. And the Sikh Coordination Committee have said that under Prime Minister Modi and, of course, Amit Shah, India has launched this undeclared war against Sikhs. So they are saying, please let's send a message to President Donald Trump and, of course, the international community, because the international cameras will be there with an audience of billions. And the Sikhs are there to, as they say, demand justice. And that's come again from the Khalistan Affairs Centre based in Washington, D.C. And actually, I have had conversations and podcasts with members from that very centre. So do keep an eye out for those. And yes, good old Gurpratwant Singh Pannu And Sikhs for Justice, unsurprisingly, have also waded in, as they tend to do on such matters. Their latest poster, of course, has this wonderful phrase which Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon has been proclaiming on many of his videos: "Kill Modi politics." Again, a very deliberately provocative use of language. The use of the word "kill Modi" in big red letters. Of course, he doesn't literally mean that, but he's used this deliberately because he knows the effect it'll have over in India. Kill Modi politics. He's saying kill the politics. But of course the Gaudiya media will immediately pick up those red lettered words, kill Modi, and that's what the message they'll be spinning using their misinformation, saying, oh, Pannoon's threatening to kill Modi again. No, he's not. He's threatening to kill Modi politics. It's not even a subtle difference, but it's a difference that the Gaudiya media will choose to ignore, of course, as they do. And Pannoon's Sikhs for Justice says, will President Trump protect American pro-Khalistan Sikhs from Modi's assassination squads? They are actually sending the message to Donald Trump. They're daring him. Look, will you protect us or not? We number around a million voters in the US. So that's an awful lot of voters that you have at the moment, generally speaking, on your side. If you don't protect us, you'll lose us. So is really sending out the message to Trump's administration there. If you want to keep us on side, you've got to protect us practically, visually, and in every way. And I'm delighted to see that at the bottom of that poster, one of the signatories is in fact one of the founders of Sikhs for Justice, co-founders alongside Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, is Dr. Bakshish Singh Sandhu. I interview Dr. Sandhu on a regular basis. I was actually due to interview him this week, but of course he will be present in Washington banging the gong, doing the good deed for the Sikh community. He'll be there alongside, I'm sure, Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, flying the Khalistan flag to make his presence known. So of course my podcast is delayed for a couple of weeks on that, unfortunately. But of course, priorities are to be there to show the Khalistan flag in front of Narendra Modi, to remind Mr. Modi as he lands in Washington that the Khalistan movement is very much alive and well. It is growing. It is expanding its support. It isn't just growing in the diaspora. It is, of course, growing in the Punjab itself. The movement is increasing in power. Its voice is becoming louder. The movement is clearly, in its own peaceful, democratic way, is winning the argument. It's winning this war. So all I would say, if you happen to be in Washington, D.C., if you are anywhere near that area, get down there. Carry your Khalistan flag. Make sure that your flag and your face is seen in front of the world's press. Narendra Modi probably won't see you. He will be protected from any protests, of course, but that almost doesn't matter. We know what his opinion is, and we know he's never going to bend. But the world's press will be, the cameras will be there. That's what matters. It's winning the public war. It's winning the public battle. The politicians will always, that's presumptuous, but will always do what they are told to do by the electorate, or instructed and elected to do so. That is what they will do. So if there are enough voices pushing the Khalistan message and the message of the rule of law and democracy for India, that is what the politicians will be pressured to do. So there you go, James. This is the Sikh community doing what they do best, standing up to injustice, getting out there, getting seen, getting the Khalistan flag out there, sending out their message to the world.
And something tells me, Angus, that he's not going to make a stop in Canada while he's in North America. Just to guess off the top of my hat, but boy, oh boy, as the old saying goes, I'd love to be a fly on the wall during those conversations and see whether or not Trump actually pushes any of the human rights issues about any of the transnational repression and foreign interference issues. I mean, there's just so much that could be brought up in those conversations. And as I said, I'd love to be a fly on the wall to hear what's going on. But let's face it, between my speaking out against Modi and against Trump, if I was a fly on that wall, I'm sure they'd have the Secret Service swat me real hard.
Indeed. And as we say, Trump is a businessman. I have no doubt that his meeting with Narendra Modi will be essentially about deal making. He'll be looking at what's best for the United States, for commerce, and what's best geopolitically and strategically for the United States. I think the fact of human rights will be very low on the agenda, but one thing that Trump does very well, and that is negotiate, the art of the deal. He's a very good negotiator, and of course he will use any leverage. He will absolutely maximise any leverage that he has on his side to get what he wants. And of course, one of the biggest areas of leverage he has over Narendra Modi, and one of Narendra Modi's biggest weaknesses, is human rights, is its human rights record. And this is where I think the human rights will come into the negotiations, is that it won't be a priority, but it will be used massively as leverage to create another deal. So when it comes down to deal making, Trump will be saying, right, this is the deal I want. And if Narendra Modi comes back equally strongly, he'll say, yeah, but let's now compare our leverages. What have you got? I've got a pretty big one. It is that your human rights record. It is appalling. We can use this. We can really pull you down on the global stage. We can really rip you apart, rip your reputation to pieces. Trump won't hold back on this. He will absolutely maximize his leverage. And this is what he's got over Narendra Modi. And Narendra Modi knows this. So I think that is where it will enter the equation. So on that note, let's hope that the fallout from the next couple of days and these meetings that Modi will be having will be positive. We, of course, will keep an eye on this and we will report on it accordingly. Next week, hopefully, we'll have some more news of hopefully what will be released about what was discussed in those meetings. Right, James. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, Angus, let's not forget also the Adani situation there, where we do anticipate charges to be removed from the indictments and out of the SEC and all of that. I think those charges will disappear, and then Modi can go home and say, this is what I did to protect our nation, our business, our investment, and our international trade and reputation. So I think that might be something that Trump is looking to utilize to give Modi the opportunity to save face on his return to India. So
absolutely right. It's all about the deal making and the leverage that can be brought in, and that, of course, is one huge area. And talking about human rights, back in the Punjab, and we talked about earlier about this dreadfully painful, slow process of law in India, which has held up so many cases, not least the likes of Jagtar Singh Johal, many of his colleagues, Amritpal Singh over in Assam in jail. Deliberately, that is the deliberate slow pace of justice in India. And another case has come to light. Believe it or not, this is a case that was only reported in the last couple of days. But the actual act occurred 8 years ago. This is the case of two Sikhs who lived in Jammu and Kashmir in J&K. They've been recently, just in the last few days, acquitted in a criminal conspiracy case. And this case dates back to 2017. So this happened 8 years ago. They had to wait 8 years for justice. Now, these two were allegedly putting up Sikhs for Justice posters near a Chandigarh college in the Punjab. Now, the presiding judge said the case against the men had gaping holes, in his words, and failed miserably to prove that they even committed any crimes. And as the Sikh community has said, these are pretty hollow attempts, deliberately designed to criminalise Sikhs. And as a result of this, they are quite often indefinitely incarcerated until these cases are heard. And they are used deliberately to act as a deterrent against khalistan campaigners. And of course, to prevent and deter anybody showing any support for the khalistan cause. And I'll just quickly run through some of the details of this case so you can understand what it was all about. Now, this actually is reported in several outlets, and I've chosen one at random. This is the Hindustan Times, of course, showing a pro-Modi bent on it, as they tend to do. But it said a local court has acquitted these two men, including what they claim was an accomplice of Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon. Yes, of course, Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, who we report on regularly. And he was arrested in a case of pasting posters regarding the Khalistan referendum in Mohali in 2017, yes, 8 years ago. Now, the judge acquitted Gurpreet Singh, who's from Mohali, in whose printing press the posters were allegedly printed, and Harpoonit Singh, who also lived in Jammu, said to be his accomplice. Now, the case related back to July 2017 when the police received a secret information. In other words, a whistleblower, somebody has gone to the police and reported these two men. Again, it has these, immediately when reading this, it reminded me of 1930s Germany, where people were encouraged to report on their neighbours. If they saw anybody in any anti-Nazi act, they were encouraged to report them to the police, the secret police, the SS and people like this, and the Gestapo. And the Gestapo then went out and arrested these people, and these people were then disappeared. So it all has these slightly disturbing reminiscences of 1930s Germany. But yeah, so police received a secret tip-off regarding these posters near religious sites in various locations across the Punjab, and one was near this college in Landran of Mohali. The posters read, "Punjab Independence Referendum." According to the police, it traced the links to Gurpatan Singh Pannoon, of course, of Sikhs for Justice, along with Jagdeep Singh, also known as Baba Jag Singh, and Jagjit Singh, both residents of New York. According to the prosecution, their local operative, Harpunit Singh of Jammu, managed the printing press through SK Publicity Printing Press being operated by Gurpreet Singh, etc., etc. So it does appear that Gurpatan Singh Pannoon has been, allegedly was using these local operatives to post up pro-referendum posters in the Punjab. Now, to me and you, James, this is a pretty normal, non-criminal act. If somebody, and again, I can relate this to the Scottish independence movement. It's equivalent to somebody in Scotland posting up posters supporting the Scottish Nationalist Party, the pro-independence party. Now that happens on an everyday basis. They're everywhere in Scotland. You go around certain parts of some of the cities, these pro-independence posters are everywhere. You can't move for posters of independence. But here in Punjab, it is seen as a criminal offence. I've got to get my head around this, where we take democracy for granted. In India's so-called democracy, posting up posters like this are seen as a criminal offence. I mean, how scary is this? Now, the article then goes on to explain some of the holes in the case, and it goes into detail why essentially the prosecution made an absolute hash of the prosecution. They allegedly looked at laptops and they claimed that they saw these posters on the laptop, the digital versions of the posters, and then they got all sorts of authorities, sanctioning authorities, to inspect these things. And in fact, it turns out that the person who allegedly signed off these warrants never actually was on duty at the time. So again, it sounds like the whole thing has been concocted, loads of fake evidence. Again, it's the same old Indian justice. It's fake evidence. It's concocted evidence. Again, it's failing justice of India. So there's lots to take away from this, but not least is firstly on a local basis. Once again, it's the local police, the local process of law just failing. Firstly, in its timely process. It's taken 8 years to bring this case to court. And of course, the case was then thrown out on basically a completely flawed case on behalf of the Indian state prosecution. But more importantly, it's the bigger picture. This is once again, these are Sikhs who are campaigning for Khalistan being targeted by the Indian state. This is not democracy. This is the Indian government weaponising the process of law, weaponising something fundamental, the fundamental mechanics of a normal democratic society, but twisting it and manipulating it into a weapon to be used against a normal, peaceful, democratic movement. People standing up for something that we take for granted in the West, James. This, to me, is a horrific indictment of the current state of India, where somebody in the Punjab, people who have just posted up a poster, have been criminalised. And actually they said in this case, the prosecution and the police themselves, they said it was criminal because it could incite division between Hindus and Sikhs. I mean, that very statement sends shivers down my spine, bearing in mind how divisive the politics of the BJP and the RSS have been over the last 10 plus years. They are now criminalising Sikhs for this very same accusation that they are guilty of. And they're saying it's the Sikhs who are being divisive. And all the Sikhs are doing is saying, look, we've never signed up to the Indian constitution. We are demanding the right to self-determination. That is a fundamental right under any democracy anywhere in the world as recognised by the United Nations. Yet yet anybody in India exercising this right is criminalised, James. That is India democracy style. That is Indian democracy. That is not democracy in any way that I've ever recognised it.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, if they want to see the reality, come to Canada. Let them watch if, somebody put up a Quebec separatist sign or an Alberta separatist sign in Vancouver. People wouldn't care. They would be open to the democracy. And, if they want to see the other end of it where violence, divisiveness, and anger breaks out, maybe bring a Toronto Maple Leafs hockey poster and put that up in Vancouver. That might do a different thing. But when it comes to politics, we're all about the democratic process. And any country that calls themselves such should be encouraging the freedom of speech of all of its citizens.
Absolutely, it's an absolute outrage, and as I often said, the Hindu nationalist extremists are campaigning quite vocally for a Hindu Rashtra. Well, why aren't they criminalised? They're the ones who are being divisive. They're the ones demanding effectively secessionism for a Hindu empire, a Hindu state. That to me is plain and simple secessionism. So why aren't they being criminalised in the same way? It doesn't just smack of hypocrisy. It just smacks of a failed democracy. This is India. This is a stain on a so-called Indian democracy. It just doesn't belong in a modern democratic nation. So anyway, we will campaign to bring the truth to the Hindu population in India itself. And we hope if you're watching from India, spread the word, get more people to watch this channel in India. You can do it through VPNs. You can do it by changing your settings, apparently, to a different country. But certainly get as many people watching this channel because you need to understand just what is going on in India. It is a failing democracy. It's becoming an embarrassment on the global stage, James. It's a very sad indictment for a nation that has so much to offer the world.
Absolutely. And there's just so much potential there. That's what's really sad is that, the majority of the Indian people, whether they are Hindu, whether they are Muslim, whether they're Sikh, they're amazing people and they have so much potential to lead the world in one hell of a great direction, Angus. And it's just not being realized under the current administration.
Right, James, let us then move on to our comment section talking about the Indian government. And Happy has commented saying, and rightly has said, look, the Indian government have basically been at war with the Sikhs since 1947. Yes, they have. We talk about it on a daily basis. They think they can keep murdering Sikhs without repercussions. Absolutely. As we said, James, it's taken 40 years, as you said earlier today, just to bring that one Congress MP to justice. Only because they're not punished in India. Well, they are, but 40 years too late. And that's only the ones they've bothered. So, Happy, you're absolutely right. Well done to Gurpatwant Singh Pannu for being the voice of every single Sikh that's been murdered and under Indian oppression right now. Absolutely. And this comment is so relevant to, the story I've just reported on, James, and the story you talked about the Congress MP being found guilty. This is absolutely right. There is this war. We know why it's happening. We say it on a regular basis. It is because the Sikhs are standing up to injustice. They are trying to alert the rest of India, the majority of the Indian population, to what is going on, this Brahmanical control that's existed since 1947, that Indians on a day-to-day basis are essentially living in a social prison. You don't realise it, but it's the Sikh community who are trying to raise this fact that they clearly cannot see for themselves, James.
Exactly, Angus. And it's, again, something that we've covered time and time again. It's how that violence just gets overlooked and brushed aside because it's minorities. And, the beautiful thing of social media is that we have the opportunity now, and YouTube and other platforms, to actually share the news and to get it out there to the international world. But what happens from there, that's up to everybody who's watching to take a stand.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to move on to a very, very interesting comment. This came from Satbak Singh. Thank you for this comment. This is really fascinating. You must talk about the Ben Gurion Canal run through Gaza to give the world secure sea transportation system instead of the Suez Canal. And as you say, all the population of Gaza will have a positive stability for the people of Gaza, whether Muslims or whatever their backgrounds or religions. 18% of Muslims are already living in Israel. Many more than 20,000 Muslims enter Israel to work daily. They queue at the border. Now, this is interesting, James. I'd forgotten about this. The Ben Gurion Canal. What is the Ben Gurion Canal? Well, I'd forgotten about this, but in the 1960s, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background about what the Ben Gurion Canal was and is, the concept. It was named after Israel's founding father, David Ben Gurion. The project, conceived in the late 1960s, sought to create an alternative route to the Suez Canal, the primary shipping route connecting Europe and Asia. It proposed to connect the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea through the southern end of the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, the Suez Canal provides the shortest sea route between Asia and Europe and currently handles around 12% of the world trade. Now, in 2021, over 20,000 vessels flowed through the canal. In 2022, the annual revenue stood at $8 billion in transit fees. It set a new record with an annual revenue of $9.4 billion the year ending 2023. Now, this canal, the US had once proposed to use some 520 nuclear bombs on the Negev desert to help create the canal. But with Gaza razed to the ground, there have been alleged plans to literally cut corners and reduce costs by diverting the canal straight through the middle of the Palestinian enclave. However, the presence of Palestinians there would remain an obstacle. Israel denies it has plans to annex the Strip, but it had called for the voluntary migration of Palestinians in Gaza amid accusations that it was ethnically cleansing the enclave. Now, I love conspiracy theories. This actually generates a really interesting conspiracy theory, James. This Ben Gurion Canal. Now, we know how important the Suez Canal is. It has been closed down on several occasions since its initial construction. It is vital for world trade. It is massively vital. And when it closes down, it does cause an enormous ripple effect disruption in the global supply chain. The Ben Gurion Canal provides an alternative that won't be controlled by, for example, an Arabic nation like Egypt, which has always been vulnerable. It created the Suez crisis, for example. But the Ben Gurion Canal would run through Israeli territory and therefore be controlled by a different sect, let's say, of the human population, as opposed to the Arab sect.
Right.
Now, the original plans had it running to the side of the Gaza Strip, as you can see from the map here. The Gaza Strip currently is lying in utter ruins. It is rubble. It's been effectively cleared by bombs, and it is ripe for reconstruction. Now, the conspiracy theorist in me, James, suddenly jumped to the conclusion, how convenient that Israeli bombs have flattened the Gaza Strip. And Donald Trump is now in the White House saying, oh, we should rebuild the Gaza Strip. Let's take control. And suddenly the Gaza Strip actually opens up a much more efficient route for this Ben Gurion Canal. Instead of going round the Gaza Strip, you can go straight through it. How jolly convenient. Yeah. But if that is the case, if that is this mad conspiracy theory that it was all concocted for this Ben Gurion Canal, which essentially the US would then control by proxy through Israel, it does actually, we look at the revenues of the Suez Canal, nearly $10 billion a year. That is a lot of money. Surely, James, there must be a solution in here somewhere. All that money that's generated could rebuild Gaza. It could rebuild that whole area. It could provide a new life for so many of these Palestinians, because the only reason that Hamas took control is poverty. These militants always manage to take control because of poverty. When people are poor, they're always looking for a solution. And if somebody comes along to provide a solution, they will support that solution. That's what Hamas did. They said, we will provide a solution to your poverty. And that's why Hamas took control. Now, all that money that's generated in the right hands, whoever those right hands are, could give a new lifeline to drag the Palestinians out of poverty, to grow this Riviera into something that actually gives them something to work towards. Instead of being militant, instead of being anti-Israeli, it gives them a reason to live, a reason to thrive and survive, James. Maybe this could be, ironically, the solution. Maybe I'm reaching out at the most outrageous conspiracy. But thank you to our commenter for this suggestion. What a fascinating route of discussion this is, James.
Absolutely, and I wasn't familiar with the Ben Gurion Canal, but I also think that that conspiracy theorist in you there, Angus, I think also has a optimistic little stripe there, because to think that that money's actually going to go and help the Palestinians or the people of Gaza, I don't know. I think that the rich people are just going to be pocketing more and more of those billions. But hey, whatever solution it is to rebuild and give those people back a life of hope and dignity, I'm all for it that way.
Yeah, fascinating. So, thank you for that comment and raising that whole issue. What a fascinating area to discuss. We'll watch that one with interest. So let's see if the Ben Gurion Canal project suddenly magically appears over the coming months. Yeah. And if so, then we know there really was a conspiracy behind the whole thing. Right, let's move on to Critics Corner, which makes a wonderful return. With a vengeance, I'm happy to say. Dave Singh wades in with some absolute crackers. What a load of bull. Khalistanis are liars. Well, really, Dave? Give us some evidence, as we often say to our critics. It's all very well throwing out outrageous criticisms and statements like they're liars. Well, why are they liars? Explain it. But then you really go and spoil the party by claiming that Shahid Najjar is an insult to Sikhism. Why? Why is he an insult to Sikhism? I think that's pretty offensive. I think a lot of Sikhs and a large part of the Sikh community in Canada would be pretty offended by that one, James.
Well, I would give it more credit if the person knew how to spell Khalistanis and liars correctly, but I just look at that and then consider the source and go, well, whatever.
So I think, Dave, saying you need to improve the quality of your criticisms if you want us to take you more seriously. Give us some more facts and evidence, and then we can talk to you like grown-ups. But nice emojis, right. By the way, very pretty emojis. Well done on those, at least. Vijay Dev. Now this is a bit more intelligent. You say that Khalistan is dead. Trudeau Jagmeet brought Canada to this rubbish situation, and the next government will close all files. Indian government will live happily ever after. So basically what you're saying is, this sweeping in of the conservative right wing in Canadian politics will remove the very pro-Sikh agenda that Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh have brought to Canada, James. What do you think on that?
Well, it is something that we're going to have to watch, because basically when you look at the next government, we don't know who it's going to be. And regardless, I think that there's enough of a population here in Canada that support the Khalistan movement, or at least support the right to have all of these referendums. I think that, it doesn't matter who's going to be in government next. I think it's going to be a very big support to respect the rights of all people, especially given the fact that India has participated in foreign interference and transnational repression on Canadian soil, that it's actually given more credibility and more support to the Khalistan movement than otherwise.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with Vijay's comment saying that India, Canada will live happily ever after. I would say that I think diplomacy with the right wing Canadian politics will improve relations with the right wing of India. I think clearly that will change the relationship. There's no doubt, because clearly the Conservatives are much more closer in bed with Modi's BJP. But what I would disagree with, Khalistan is dead. No, Khalistan is very much not dead. You only need to see the turnout to all the referendums that have occurred across Canada, and the campaigning that is so very visible in Canada. Khalistan within the Canadian diaspora is very, very much alive, and certainly around the world the Khalistan movement is growing in support, it is growing in visibility, it is still very, very much alive. And B. Mahar finishes off Critics Corner with, so the Khalis need a Gora to present their propaganda crap. I had to look up this word Gora, and apparently it means whitey. So apparently we whiteys. Now if I was a young snowflake, I would actually be offended by that term. Of course I'm not. Of course, not a problem. But apparently, according to B. Mahar, the Khalistan movement needs people like us, James, to present this propaganda. Well, it doesn't need people like us. We joined voluntarily. The Khalistan movement is very, very active, very vocal amongst the Sikh community. But it just so happens that people like James and I have joined this campaign because we absolutely see the righteousness in it. We see the justification for Khalistan. And many people like us are joining this movement, not just within the Sikh community, but outside the Sikh community. There are many other Goras, as you call them, who have joined the Khalistan campaign because they know it is the right thing. They know that that is a debt that is owed to the Sikh community within the Punjab, and of course the Sikh diaspora who've left the Punjab essentially running for their lives because of this very reason, because Khalistan needs to be established. So I'm sorry, Bhima, to disappoint you, but this channel exists, presented by two Gora, for a very good reason, is because there are many people like James and I who support the Khalistan movement. Do we not, James?
Absolutely. And look at the bright side, Angus. I've been called much worse, and that was just since noon.
Absolutely. I think I'm sure out there in social media there are much, much worse terms that James and I have been referred to. So thank you anyway, Bhima, for your comment, for your contribution on that. Achar Singh Gill says, Sat Sri Akal, and Sat Sri Akal to you, Achar Singh Gill. Akal Purak, God bless Angus and James. Well, God bless yourself. Your impartial analysis and honesty is much appreciated. Well, as we often say, yes, impartiality is why we are here and honesty is why we are here. It is all about bringing the truth. That's why we exist. And then you continue to say, Khalistani groups like Dal Khalsa and Sikh Siyasat, I've always struggled to say this word, Siyasat, are openly active in India. However, the Godi media is obsessed with activities abroad. It gives them the opportunity to blow things out of proportion, good for home consumption. Yes, I think the key point here, and you're absolutely right with this one, I would agree with this, is that, of course, the Godi media is outrageous. It's the stuff it churns out is just a joke. It's farcical, but it doesn't matter. Really, because the reason it does this, it's not for us, James, it's for domestic consumption. All it needs to do is ensure that the majority of Indians domestically are given the right narrative. It doesn't matter what the rest of the world thinks. It doesn't matter if we laugh at them as we do and point out the fact that it's absolute nonsense. It doesn't matter. They don't care. All they need to worry about is ensuring that the domestic population in India stay on side to Modi. They are fed the right narrative to keep them on side, that they are fed the right propaganda, James. That's all that they care about.
And that's what it's all about, right? It's about the propaganda. It's about the information. But, we're here to spread the truth. We're here to give an opinion. And, of course, there's going to be people that take the opposing opinion against what we're saying, and they're welcome to it. And we even invite them to share those opinions on our comments pages so that we can make sure that we can counter it, but also that we give fair time to the other side in consideration. But at the end of the day, let's just keep things rolling as honest as we can without blowing it out of proportion, Angus.
Absolutely. And Suff2 Muffins, welcome to the channel, Suff2 Muffins. Thank you for your comment. You continue this same theme and absolutely right when you say the Godi media is both shameful and shameless. It is absolutely right. It is absolutely outrageous. And in fact, yes, of course, we're all referring back to that report that we showed in, was it 2 days ago in that show when, they basically, the most watched news outlet actually said that Khalistanis didn't deserve to be alive and that their assets should be confiscated. Again, shameful and shameless. Absolutely right. And then the final comment from Harjinder Kondel says, I love your programme, thanks. Well, thank you, Harjinder, for that comment, that lovely comment, which many comments like that, but thank you specifically for yours as well. And we, of course, love your comments, so do keep those comments in. As James said at the beginning of the show, for some reason yesterday's show, I don't know if it was a thumbnail or whatever, it wasn't very well watched. Some shows are just like that. Maybe it was just a bad day on social media, who knows. But do keep your comments coming. We do appreciate your comments, don't we, James?
Absolutely, we do. And again, it's just one of those little glitches, but sometimes we see it pop up. If you're following on these on Facebook pages, I did go on this afternoon and updated for everybody to watch the newest episode. So again, let us know if you're finding that you're being notified on Facebook of the new episodes as they're brought up, and gives you the link to the YouTube channel. We'd love to know that. If that's helping to keep you informed of new updates or new episodes, I'll be happy to spend even more time spreading the word. So yeah, by all means, like, follow, and subscribe, everyone.
Please do. But on that note, we must bring perspectives to a close for another day. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in, though. Do send in your comments, even if it's just a single word of support. We do read every single one, and we do love reading them. And of course, thank you for so many of your really informative, really interesting comments. There have been a few interesting threads on there as well that we've enjoyed reading, so do keep those coming in. Don't forget, you can message us directly as well, as many of you have done. Thank you for your emails that have been coming in. You can message us at message@sutledgetv.com. So if there's something you want to bring to our attention that you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, that is it for another week. Thanks so much for watching Perspectives. Thanks so much for your continuing support. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next week.